Thank you. Kuzuk Pula, Chule, as we greet in Ladakh. So I bring warm greetings from a cold and snowy trans-Himalayan Ladakh to a rainy green Bhutan. So, Chule. Talking about contextual, place-based education, I find it strange that we have to talk about it. It's a no-brainer. Education should be for the place, for the people where they are. Yet it is not a no-brainer if we look into who and why the education system was designed. If it was for the well-being of the people, then it will definitely be around the people, centered around the people. But unfortunately, modern education or modern industrial education was designed around industrial revolution in England. And then when it comes to countries like India, it was designed to suit their needs, and therefore context, place, needs were not as important as running the machinery. It's not just about India receiving this from England. Within Britain also, when industrial revolution was happening, people moved from every part of England to Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, industrial centers, or Glasgow, from all the hills. And all these people from everywhere, nobody would bother about addressing each one's needs. It was more a training and grooming of the slaves for the masters. Whether it is an industrialist in England for rural England or India for Britain. And when that happens, you centralize and make it most efficient for your industry and not for the people who are to be educated. And therefore, I find it a no-brainer, yet strange that decades after colonial rules have gone, we continue the same. We talk of centralized boards of education, central universities. These things irk me to no end. Why should it be central boards and central universities when it is about solving problems? It is remedies to melodies, when melodies are so different from the cold, high-altitude deserts of Ladakh to the low, hot deserts of Rajasthan, to coastal Kerala, to rainy Himalayan Bhutan or Meghalaya. How can it be central? The melodies are so different. How can the remedies be centralized? If you have headache, you take pills for that. If you have knees aching, you take for that. You can't have one centralized medicine for all maladies. And therefore, it's a no-brainer. So education for who is the question here? Are we educating for the people for their well-being or for an industrial system? Even these little kindergartens we look at smilingly, I see them as a means towards the industrial objectives. You know, little children from 3, 4 putting in these systems when they could be best placed in the laps of their grandmothers and grandparents. These were, I don't think, meant for the children. These were meant for the industrialists who wanted their parents to work from 8 to 6, and these children were a problem in that. And to optimize the labor of the economics, they invented these kindergartens to keep the children away from the hair of the labor force. So who it is for is therefore more a question. I've been observing Bhutan's educational journey for many decades, from 93 onwards. I've seen the new approach to primary education, NAEP, and further developments, many good steps. And in my first visit in 93, I think, one of the things I was happy to see As a young education reformer in Ladakh, when I asked them about what about primary education, they had NAEP, new approach to primary education. And what about pre-primary education? They said, we don't have. And someone said, well, our families are so good, our grandparents take good care of their children. And that's the best pre-primary education you can imagine. That was the best system. It was not that we don't have a pre-primary. We are not a broken society yet. Our families live together and grandparents take care of grandchildren. Imagine, in the name of modern education, you uproot these little children from the laps of the grandparents who are there. It's not Liverpool or Manchester. And yet you do it in the rural areas of Bhutan or Ladakh, uproot the children. Children are unhappy in a so-called school where teachers are not as kind as their grandparents, and therefore crying all day. And the grandparents are crying all day because they are lonely without their grandchildren. So this is what we have made of the education system. Now, more we understand if we look at education for what. Again, from England, I think it came, when I would explore what is learning and education, people would tell me the 3 R's, it's basic education, 3 R's. And 3 R's, if you ask, reading, writing, and arithmetic, all to do with head alone. Head, head, head. And they don't even start with R to say 3 R's, so you can imagine who invented it. Anyway, head, just educating the head is not enough for a whole human being to bloom. And therefore, in Ladakh, we started saying it shouldn't be just making them, clever mathematicians and scientists with a huge ego and arrogance, but rather we should have head as good as anybody in the world, but also skilled hands, the second edge of hands, which our parents are better than us. Our grandparents are even better. If we are a step ahead in these skills also, then we could say we are educated. But skills of the hands, again, is also not enough. You could be the most skilled pickpocket, and that's skills of the hand, and very bright head it takes, until you have a kind, compassionate heart. So more than 3 R's, we thought we need 3 H's, head, hands, and heart. Later, we were most pleasantly surprised that Mahatma Gandhi, 100 years ago, was advocating for the same. But heart, a compassionate heart, will make sure that the hands and the head go in the right direction. The world can never be a bad place if the heart is in the right place. But again, the heart doesn't serve the industry. Actually, none of the schools address the education of the heart. And if they did, it may bring down the efficiencies in their system. I don't know if it is on purpose or out of ignorance. They don't address educating a kind, compassionate heart in every child to see a kind, compassionate world. So anyway, I'll just start with this. Gitanjali, who heads the Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, will share with images this same concept being in action in Ladakh in a small effort in an alternative school and in an alternative university. So she'll take it from 3 H's and beyond. Thank you, Gitanjali.
Good morning and namaste. I thought I'll do away with the lectern, so there's more conversation. And I decided to do the PPT because 10 minutes is a very short time and a picture speaks 1,000 words. So I'll go straight to the point. So we'll quickly look at the purpose of education. For what, as Sonam was saying. Is it skills to learn earns one livelihood? Is it social awareness towards better citizenship? Is it intelligence and character, as Martin Luther King says? Is it embarking on a path of self-discovery? Intuitively, we know it is all of the above. But somehow the education system today is focused on just the first one. And that too, it does not do a good job because it does not teach kids how to learn. So if we have to achieve all these objectives, I propose 5 pillars of education for the future that will take care of the needs of the 21st century, of the world, the community, and the human being. The mother of Sri Aurobindo Ashram says that an aimless life is a miserable life, and on the quality of your aim will depend on the quality of your life. So your aim has to be high and wide, noble and generous and disinterested. But the education system teaches us the opposite of this: competitive, selfish, seeking your own interests. And the presentation is based on Sonam's 30 years of experience as an educator running SECMOL, my own journey of following Sri Aurobindo's integral education, and being a lifelong learner, studying karate. I'm a black belt, second Dan, which I learned at the age of 35. Okay, and the very hands that can break a tile, which are strong, should be graceful enough to be a dancer, to do ballet. And this journey of mine, along teaching the scriptures of India, combining business strategy and management with ancient wisdom, combining karate with ballet, being this integral person, and then implementing it in my son's life, this is the ethos from where I speak. Ladakh, as Sonam said, is a high-altitude, cold mountain desert. It is fed by the glacial melts. Temperatures range from -30 to +30. Whatever works for tropical India cannot work here. So the youth have to be empowered to take charge of their contexts and to learn to live a life of dignity in harmony with nature. That's why Himalayan Institute of Alternative was decided to be set up, and this was the picture I took from the aircraft when Sonam told me this would be the site of the place. Not a drop of water, not a blade of grass. But it didn't deter us, because 30 years ago, a similar desert was converted by Sonam and his team into the SECMOL school, the world-famous SECMOL school, which built itself on few pillars, and to which my experience and studies of Sri Aurobindo's integral education has added the other pillars. So the first pillar we talk about in making a doers and makers university. So for the first time in the world, HIAL is a university that combines academics, research, and entrepreneurship. It is a doers university. I'll come to that a bit later. And this was the master plan based on the Buddhist Upekha path of contextuality, where the schools range from school of architecture to school of spirituality, through schools of energy, tourism, and so on. This is evolution from material to the spiritual. So contextual education is in -20 degrees. You cannot make buildings like this. They would be at 0 to 5 degrees. For instance, I take one example. So we made 4 or 5 kinds of buildings, same footprint, and inspired by the old buildings of Ladakh, Palace of Saspol, this is rammed earth, to make solar, modern, passive buildings like this. These buildings stay at +20 when it is -20 outside without any artificial heating. And it took the world 30 years to recognize this and give it awards like Global Award for Sustainable Architecture and Lyon, the Terra Award. And these were life-size pilots. We just didn't install sensors in them, we installed ourselves. We were the guinea pigs to experience the thermal comfort. And because contextual in space, time, and experience, By experience, it is the mother tongue, the indigenous knowledge systems. And this technology was drawn from the context for today's time, and drawing on indigenous knowledge systems. And when we checked the graphs, if the ambient temperature is between -5 to 0, the heated buildings stayed at 15 degrees when they were heated and 0 to 5 when they were not. Our building stayed at 20 to 25 degrees without any artificial heating. So these are world's first, not just net zero, but net positive, not just carbon neutral, but carbon negative buildings in the world. And they also make economic sense because 7 years of operational cost of heating the building gets you back the cost of making the building. So alternative need not be non-profitable. That's where we have to work towards. And so then we scaled it up into large size buildings because there were a lot of naysayers that you can do it only for smaller ones, to large size buildings on our campus. And today we have 2 lakh square feet of these buildings, saving more than 5,000 tons of carbon per year. And this is contextual education, scaling up to high-end resorts, and finally building for the Indian Army and luxury suites, because earth is considered a poor man's material, but we made it into an elite material through rammed earth and made for the Indian Army because it's very difficult to transport fuel there. So an example of contextual education. And through this, we have generated many builders, architects, civil engineers, and these buildings form the policy document now which we submitted to the government, and UT government has now made it a policy that all tourism buildings have to be passive solar heated. So university has to work for the needs of the community, do research so that government can scale up, while empowering the students to become future entrepreneurs and leaders. Moving to the second, this is how the campus looks today. And moving to the second pillar, experiential learning. It is learning by doing. And in the context, one has to engage with it, not just theoretically. So our students work in the villages of Ladakh to make these artificial glaciers to solve the water problem in spring when there is farming season and the glaciers had not yet started melting, which is why it is a desert. And we started from one village in Phyang, where a university is located, and today, through drip irrigation, we've started greening the village and scaled it up to 111 villages across the world. And we were recipients of the Rolex Award for Enterprise, which was the seed money for the university that we set up. It's now scaled up to 111 villages across the world, including Switzerland, Chile, Gilgit-Baltistan, Nepal, and so on. So we are perhaps the only university in the country that does reverse technology transfer. Our passive solar heated buildings through UNDP have gone to Afghanistan and other Tibetan plateau countries, so have these artificial glaciers. Moving on, the third pillar, and this year we've started automating it, which is another story. We can take it up later. The third pillar of our education for the future is transdisciplinary approach to problem solving. Not just in Ladakh, but also in Himachal and several countries of Europe, the villages are getting abandoned. There is more urbanization. The urban centers are exploding and villages are imploding, and it's not sustainable in the long run. So our transdisciplinary approach has several centers of excellence, one of them which rehabilitates these villages. So this is a village in Kulum, very close to Upshi, where the first tectonic movement happened and the Himalayas were formed. And this village was abandoned. It's a lovely village with large farmlands, but people just locked their homes and went to nearby highway where there were this loss of dignity, loss of land. They're just having small shops and earning their livelihood because the canals dried up, the glacier dried up. So our transdisciplinary question to our students was, can you again make it a story of hope and a valley of flowers? And 4 of our schools in a transdisciplinary spirit came together. The School of Ecology made ice stupas in that village. The School of Agriculture and Forestry decided to do horticulture, agriculture, and greening of the valley. The School of Eco-Responsive Architecture retrofitted the buildings and made them into passive solar heated, so people can stay happily. Otherwise, Ladakhis, whatever they earn during the year, they spend half of it in the winters because they have to go out to Jammu or Chandigarh or Goa. And finally, the School of Tourism is curating it as an edu-tourism destination so that people from not just India but across the world can come and learn how villages can be rehabilitated. And in 2021, after 15 years, we harvested 1,500 kilos of potatoes. And 2 years later, about 5,000 kilos, and half the village came back, and this year the entire village would come back and be rehabilitated. So this is the transdisciplinary approach. The 4th pillar, as was discussed yesterday, is AI is here to stay. And AI has reached, if you look at Bloom's taxonomy, AI has reached up to analyze and evaluate stage of the human mind. It's almost there trying to create. So, as Manoj was telling in his presentation yesterday, so what does the human do from here if it has not to be a slave of machines? So AI is actually pointing us, if we take the Indian knowledge systems, remember and understand is our subconscious memory, chitta, we call it. Apply and analyze is our sense mind, which we have to purify. Evaluate and create is what we call buddhi or wisdom. But Indian knowledge systems have beyond buddhi something called intuition, which, unlike the West, is not just for gifted children. Yogic psychology enables that each of us can go and access those higher levels of the mind. And Sri Aurobindo has, in his records of yoga, given detailed explanations of his own journey to access higher regions of the mind and deeper regions of the heart, which is beyond the subliminal and the heart self into our very soul, that the machines cannot copy. Because ChatGPT can only regurgitate what has in the past, but what can come in the future is something only human beings can do. So it's high time we took the education to developing higher ranges of the mind, and there is where India and Bhutan and all the Eastern countries can lead the world, because spirituality is not now restricted to Sunday church going or just temple morning. It has to become a part of life. And spirituality, according to Sri Aurobindo, is nothing but evolution of human consciousness. And that's where AI is pointing us towards. And it's good AI is doing whatever it is doing, because otherwise, why should we dehumanize ourselves? If machines can do, let us work and, get to the other higher ranges of our human, evolution. So this is our 4th pillar, where we encourage our students to do out-of-the-box thinking, to empathy. So when our fellows come for the first 1 week, they are taken to a village, and they live, and they do the farming there. And then one girl came up with this idea, and then they decide what they will be innovating. And one of the girl came up that I want to use IoT and automate drip irrigation system, because I see this Amale get up at 5 in the morning in the freezing cold, when it is, and she's watering the plants. So innovation, not for the sake of innovation, as also Divyanshi was saying, technology not for the sake of technology, but rooted in empathy, and as the Bhagavad Gita says, for loka sangraha, for making the world a better place. So we have to make our kids rooted in empathy, deeper order thinking, and higher ranges of the mind. And finally, The fifth pillar of education, Sonam mentioned, we have moved from 3R to 3H. I'll just take a minute to introduce to you the Indian concept of 3 A's of education. We have to move even beyond 3H. So head and hands refer to Adhibhuta, the material consciousness around us, the materiality. Adhibhuta is the material world around us. So head and heart is both Adhidaiva. India made a distinction between heart and soul, and let's not forget that. That will be the defining difference and feature that Asia has to give to the world. And that's Adhidaiva is our non-material aspects, our emotional and mental. But what we are missing today in the education system, and we have to bring it back unabashedly, even though the West does not understand consciousness and it wants to call it transpersonal and so on, we have to be unabashedly, bringing spirituality into Indian curriculum, because only then India and Bhutan and Asia can lead the world. And that is the third A, Adhyatma. And all of this I put down in this infographic, which puts the child at the center. And there is Adhyatma, Adhibhuta, and Adhidaiva. So Adhibhuta is knowledge of the material world, which you understand through the natural world and how the world works. And that can only happen through contextual education, which makes us self-reliant. Today, UK is suffering from energy crisis, but a far-flung village of Ladakh in Zanskar is self-sufficient. They grow their own food, they make their own clothes. So 80% of traditional Indian village staple needs came from their own context. Globalization is a myth by some greedy MNCs, who want to not make us be self-sufficient. And contextual education gives us that material freedom. Adhidaiva is the relational world, which is the man-made world and ideas that change the world. Today we are teaching our kids only to follow somebody's product of the mind 100 years ago, be it Marxist communism or socialism, or we are not teaching them to develop higher order thinking and create ideas today that would change the world. After the new consciousness that has come into the Earth's atmosphere, we will have to redefine all our systems of social, economic, political, and have children be empowered from their childhood. And this happens through higher order thinking and deeper order feeling, and leads to social transformation. And finally, Adhyatma is knowledge of oneself. Last 400 years has been only knowledge of objective reality. We know the biggest planet in the galaxy, we know about the smallest quark, but we don't know about ourselves. The next age is the subjective age. It's only with all the narratives floating around, where is the truth? We don't know where the truth is. We still don't know why the AI crashed in Ahmedabad. There are 50 different views about it. So how do we develop kids and that subjective knowledge of knowing the truth, so that I know who am I and how to express myself? And that can happen through experiential education and lead to personal transformation. Only then we become a fulfilled human being, a fulfilled society, a fulfilled nation, and a fulfilled world. Thank you. Happy to add that this infographic will be on permanent display at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London as the education of the future.